Greetings. We are here today with Dr. Eric Kelley. He's a CAK dad of 5 children, and he has some good words to lay on you seniors about what to do when you're in college and how to prepare. Thank you so much for coming today.
Sure.
We really appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit about where you work and kind of your day-to-day involvement with college students?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a finance professor at UT, and I've been on the faculty in the business school for the last 5 years. I was previously on the faculty at the University of Arizona, so I was there for 8 years. So I've been doing this for a bit of time. I teach our finance majors and accounting majors, their core investments class, and so this is a class for either second semester juniors or first semester seniors, and so I don't really see anyone in the lower classes, so they're already sort of on their way to their careers. But I teach investments. I teach a couple of sections. This semester I'll teach a couple of sections again in the fall, and then I also spend a lot of time working with doctoral students, and I work on my own research and got all sorts of service commitments in the department and the college.
Wow, it sounds like a great job. Lots of
It's
different
a fun
parts.
job. It's a fun job. It's different every day.
Great. Well, one of the things that we're interested in doing here at CAK is helping prepare our students for life after CAK. So once we get them launched into the college of their choice, we want them to be successful both academically and professionally, socially. So I'm wondering, of the students that you see, do you feel like they are prepared for college, both academically and otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's a mixed bag. And of course, so since I don't see the entering freshmen or even the sophomores, that initial level of preparedness I can't really observe. But of the ones that I do see, there are some that kind of know what they're doing and they take responsibility for their education. But then there's others that really, in a lot of ways, aren't. And at that level, when they're juniors. If you're asking about sort of what unpreparedness looks like, there it's still sort of being in a mindset where you need to be spoon-fed information and then you just sort of regurgitate facts, as opposed to really kind of seeing your education at this point as the entry point to your career. And so the ones that are prepared and at that point are the ones that really take initiative, take learning seriously, attempt to find answers for themselves when they can't figure it out. They tend to ask more questions, and so I definitely see some of both.
That just prompts me to ask you a follow-on question. If you see a student that has not yet made the mindset shift of they're responsible, they're moving into the professional world shortly, is that something that someone could help them with? Or is that something they just have to take on themselves and one day step out? And how do you help these students kind of grow up?
It's hard because there's a lot of students that really are right there and they want to move forward. And so I'm right there with them. I'm pushing them. And at this point in their lives, they're 20, 21 years old. And so it's in a lot of ways not really my responsibility, or I don't take it as my responsibility to pull people along. I hate to say it, but I sort of run off and leave them. And they're either gonna be there, they're gonna take responsibility, or they're not. All that said, I do typically at the first of every semester talk to my students about, well, here's things that you can and should do if you want to succeed. So I give them sort of
the formula.
Yeah. So I try to say on the first day of class, both in person and in writing, here's what you need to do to be successful on the tests. or more generally, here's what you need to do if you want to be successful in this course and ultimately in a finance-related career. And invariably, I'll get questions before the second midterm. Hey, how do I prepare for this midterm? And my response is, well, let's go back to day one. It's recorded on video. You can watch what I said, or you can read what I wrote. And so that's my answer's not changing. And so I just kind of gently direct them back to that. And sometimes it feels a little cold and gruff, but you know, it's important to me to use any time I have with the students as constructively as possible. And so you know, if I'm gonna, and I think one way to be really constructive with them is to say, hey, here's what's expected of you. Here's what you can and should do on your own to move forward. And so I use time to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like one of your main skills that you're equipping them for with this is resourcefulness.
Absolutely.
You are
absolutely
wanting them to pick up their problems, look for solutions, resources, and you're there if they need you, but that shouldn't be a constant thing.
Yep, absolutely. And and quite frankly, that's what their career is going to look like, right? Once they set foot in their career, it's not as if they're going to take in a bunch of information on Monday and then go take a test on it on Wednesday and then take in more information on Friday and then do it over and over again. No, they're gonna have certain tasks, certain problems that they have to solve that may not have 100% correct answers. They're going to have to make, if someone is setting up an investment portfolio, there's certainly a set of principles they need to understand. There's a way of thinking about risk and the financial markets that is valuable, but in terms of finding the absolute correct answer, unfortunately there isn't one. And so instead they need to be able to take in as much information as possible, ask questions, read a lot of opinions, and sort of they just have to make decisions in the midst of uncertainty. And they're going to be doing that on a day-to-day basis for the rest of their lives. And so I try to structure my interactions with them in the classroom and outside the classroom sort of with that end goal in mind. They don't always like it, right? Because when there exists a set of information with very clear, defined answers, that's easy, right? But their career path, it's not going to be easy, and so I try to equip them for that.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable when you first go into a new situation. When you're first given these big, open-ended tasks, I think that can be uncomfortable for a student who's not used to operating in that larger realm. So I think it's wonderful that you're telling them how to be successful and then giving them the space to go off and figure it out.
And I think that too, I do try to break things down into small pieces that they can understand and get their heads around. And so even if the overall task is overwhelming, there are little pieces of it, little steps in the road that are not quite so overwhelming. And so I also like to teach my students to try to start with the steps that they know that they can take those steps, take the next steps, take the next steps, and then move forward.
Okay, and then in your work with PhD students or candidates that are working on a dissertation, I'm sure that's the same way, right? That's an overwhelming process that has to be brought back into how to order those steps. Well, just today I was in a classroom with the juniors, and we were talking about how college is often the first time that you've had to overlay your own schedule. You've got a lot of unstructured time, you've got classes in there, and you really have to kind of figure out how you're going to manage that. And no one's double checking that for you. No one's making sure you get to class, make sure you do your homework. It's gone. So I think it's so important to get that mindset early on of, I'm now responsible for me. And there's a lot of people who will help me, but they're not going to do it for me. So
buy a planner, students. Buy a planner. You
are singing our song. We love planners in counseling.
Yes, I actually like the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. This is a little infomercial. He's got a great planner. It's kind of expensive, but it's actually really good. And I'm really big on actually physically writing things down. I know there's a lot of stuff that you can do digitally, but it's amazing what physically writing things down on a calendar and making your top 3 things you need to get done list on a daily basis. It's huge.
That's great advice. Are there other skills that you feel like are really important to be a successful college student, but also to kind of get you ready for a professional career out after college?
Sure. I think one that doesn't get enough attention is self-awareness. So we need to know what our strengths are, and we also need to know our limitations. And then in social or classroom settings, we need to kind of be aware of what's going on around us and how we're contributing to the overall environment. But back to the knowing what we're good at and knowing our limitations. I can help if a student comes in to talk to me and says, okay, I've made it through 1, 2, and 3, but I'm stuck on 4. And so the student basically is very aware of what they don't know. I can help that student so much better than the student that, well, just sort of assumes that they already know everything and then they want to come in and impress. That doesn't go very far. But knowing the limitations and then knowing the strengths, right? So I mean, we all at some level have to work in groups, and for me to know where I can best contribute and where I should maybe sit down and shut up, that helps me. That helps the whole group as well. And then just little social settings like seeing. I've seen college students interact with people in the business community at dinners or somewhat social gatherings, but they're really designed for networking.
How about communication skills? Reading, writing, speaking. How important are those in
Definitely
life?
very important. And important in my field. I can speak from my own experiences and the types of things that I see my students doing. So finance is a very quantitative discipline. If someone's in a finance-related career, that person is going to have a lot of relationships either with clients if they're doing something on sort of the investment side, or within a firm if the person is working sort of in the CFO's type function in the firm where they're making decisions about the project the firm is going to take. In either case, the student that I'm sort of training is likely going to be one of the more quantitative people in their relationships. If it's dealing with, say, the marketing function in the firm, being able to converse with those people about why this may or may not be a feasible strategy from a financial perspective. Okay.
How about writing? Just writing reports, things that make sense. Is that still a skill we need to have?
Absolutely, and I think, and I know in this day and age, there's so much that happens through text message or some other form of some kind of instant communication, which usually involves very poor grammar, no punctuation, and greetings like "Hey," and that just that doesn't jive in most business environments today. I mean, I think the report is one thing, and I think in some settings, the students that I train are going to have to issue bigger reports. But I think perhaps the more important thing is just kind of the day-to-day, quick email type communications. I get emails from students fairly regularly, and they typically have to do with one of two things. One, why they're missing a class or missing a test, or two, telling me about something that they don't understand and they're seeking help. Those emails usually come in one of two types. One, the glorified text message, again, that starts with, hey, and maybe ends with, I don't understand number 12, and then signed, and that's it. That's it. The other form is actually, it has a formal greeting. Dear Professor Kelley, I'm a student in your class, blah, blah, blah. I've been working on this. I'm having trouble at this point. Here's what I think I should do, but it's not working out. Here's a screenshot of what I'm working on. Could you please help me at this point? That email typically gets a little bit better response from me than the first one. But what I would say to our high school seniors, every single piece of communication that you use, especially with one of your instructors now in high school, one of your professors in college, or someone in your job, every single piece of communication is, one, an opportunity to practice, and so you should. You should think of it as this is a very important thing that I'm trying to communicate, so you can practice your skills. And two, it's something that the other person is going to remember for a long time. I don't get, from the students that do email me, I still don't get very many emails. I might get 4 or 5 a semester from any given student that actually wants to engage in email. Most students don't email at all, but the ones that do just send a few. And so every one of those, they do kind of mean something. And when you're thinking about your instructors in high school, your professors in college, these are people who are ultimately going to choose to go to bat for you when you're trying to get admission somewhere, to college or grad school, or to get a job or get an internship. And you want to plant as many positive seeds as you can, because they definitely matter.
What would you look for if you were hiring an intern? What would you look for in the interview?
Definitely I want somebody that's self-motivated. In the finance field in particular, there aren't a lot of cookie-cutter jobs where you just sort of fit a specific role in a widget factory. Rather, the jobs are people who ultimately end up making decisions, or at least support people making decisions. And so, so taking initiative in the overall decision-making process is really good. So definitely I want people who are willing to take initiative. Since finance is a quantitative field, you've got to be mathematically competent. And when I say mathematically competent, basic algebra. It's shocking how many college students really struggle with basic algebra, stuff that you'd probably cover in Algebra 1. And those things in Algebra 1 that you don't do for 3 or 4 years, if you end up in even a mildly quantitative field, they come back. And so I don't, if I were hiring someone, I would not want to hire someone that I have to explain how you move the x from one side of the equation to another. Certainly wanting to kind of find answers to questions. Yeah, definitely that. I think another aspect of curiosity is just the general awareness of the so many things in the world around us that we really don't understand. The willingness to continually ask questions. Okay. And some of this is just life lessons. A good friend of mine told me a long time ago that the truth is never offended by being questioned. And I think that's something that's really worth embracing on an academic level, on a spiritual level, across the board. The truth is not offended by being questioned. And so as a researcher then, one of one of my tasks is to really try to develop our understanding of how the financial markets work, how they should work, and how they actually do work. And so what do? I make predictions based on economic theory, and then I try to gather data and run some programs and do some statistical type things and get some results and interpret them. And on the front end, I don't know how the tests are going to turn out, but as a researcher, I sort of embrace the role as a truth teller. So I make some predictions about what I think is going to happen, and then see what happens, and say, okay, well, this is what's being revealed through the research process.
That's fascinating. Back to kind of the basic mechanics of a class. What do you do if a college student shows up late to class?
Nothing. I just keep going. I certainly don't back. At the first of class, I may have some activity that is in some sense required to really understand what's going on later on in the class. And so I'm certainly not going to backtrack and repeat all of that for the benefit of the person who was too lazy to get there on time. I'm just not going to do that. I also, in a lot of my classes, will do. I use the little response clickers. They can use them on their phone. And so the way I set up my classes is I do like a screencast video that's 10 to 15 minutes that's over kind of the core stuff that we're going to do for the class, and their assignments to watch the video before class so that they're ready to come and move forward. And so oftentimes in the first 2 minutes of class, I'll do like a three question quiz based on the video where they use their clickers, and then we're all done. So somebody comes in 5 minutes late and they miss the quiz. Well, they miss the quiz. They get a 0. That's just, and they know this, right? They know. I try to tell them, here's what's expected of you from the beginning, and usually they do a pretty good job of getting there. I do appreciate it when if a student, typically people are there on time, but students will occasionally need to leave early for whatever reason, doctor's appointment or interview or something like that, and it's courteous. They'll oftentimes just stop by and say, hey, I'm going to leave a little bit early today, just wanted to let you know, and that goes a long way. I really appreciate the courtesy, and what I've found is I try to respect my students. They typically respect me. It sort of works well that way.
Can you think of any other things that we haven't covered today that would be advice to our students so that they can hit the ground running in college?
I think it's great if they can know what's important to them from the beginning, academically, socially, spiritually. Know what's important, and when I say know what's important, I don't mean I'm not trying to say know what you think is supposed to be important or know what your parents say is important. I encourage students to really own what's important to them. Now, there's certain things that I think should be important, but unless an individual actually owns that himself or herself, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think really know and embrace what is important to them. That's one thing. I think another thing is in interactions with professors, I think it's fair to assume that your professor wants to help you. At the same time, it's fair to assume that your professor expects you to sort of take initiative and bring something to the game on your own. So in a sense, come prepared. And so the interactions with professors are hugely meaningful, and they don't happen that often. And so I'd encourage students to just from the beginning have some level of preparedness for those interactions, but then once they're in these interactions, assume that the professor wants to help them until they're proven otherwise, right?
Right. And then finally, at a big university like UT or any other really large non-Christian school, what do you suggest students can do to continue their faith journey and not get lost in the college shuffle and all the new distractions?
I think finding a community as quickly as they can is huge. A community of college students who love Jesus is great. I think it's equally important to have someone older who's pouring into them, and so some healthy balance where where there are people maybe 10 years older or even their parents' generation that are regularly speaking into their lives. That's huge. So get into that. Ask the Lord for that opportunity, and then plug into it when the Lord presents it. So that's one. Two, I think in a large secular university, there's very little God talk in the classroom for sure, but there will be some professors that sort of drop little hints, and I encourage and professors. Some professors, the ones that professors who love Jesus, may intentionally do this. Probably going to be pretty subtle, but just be aware of that. Have your radar up, and if you think you've got a professor that is that one loves Jesus and two is interested in your own journey in loving Jesus, just at some point you might have to take a risk and say, hey, you said this in class. That really resonated with me. Where's that coming from? If the professor was intentional in dropping those subtle hints, then they'll latch on to that. If not, no biggie. They might say, well, I don't know, I read in a philosophy book or something. And you can, no harm, no foul. Just move on.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate that, and on behalf of the seniors who will be watching this, thank you for helping them launch their college journey with good skills.
Welcome. You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Good luck, seniors. God bless.